I get chills when we talk about that residential segregation, because that leads into not only residential segregation, but when we're talking about food mirages, and we don't want to use the word food desert anymore, because it's not a food desert. It's food apartheid, and that goes into when we're talking about the residential segregation, when they redline us into a certain area, they redline us into a way of living that permeates for generations. We have to look at it as far as when we're talking about that, is that you redline a whole community of people to a little strip of land. We can even talk about Palestine within that, where the Israeli government has destroyed all the olive trees. 98% of the water in the Gaza Strip is poisonous. But yet you put these people into a little bitty tiny area, you kill their livestock, you destroy their houses. So when we're talking about residential segregation, we're talking about redlining you for years, where you cannot get the best food, you cannot get the best schools, you get substandard housing, you can't give, the banks don't give you loans, the freeways cut you off. And so we're not going to get into how we find out how these freeways were set up since the 1950s to keep Black people in certain ways. When they bring in concrete bed plants and leather tanning plants in these brown and Black communities, and they keep you there and they poison the food and the water. That's residential segregation, to keep you within an invisible line. And not only do they keep you within that visible line through poverty and lack of education, they keep you there through the lack of proper food, but they have a very strong police and military presence. And we even talk about that when we're talking about food sovereignty and wanting to plant community gardens, because you got to go and get permits. You got to make sure that you're zoned right. You got to make sure that you have adequate water. You got to get permission from these people to even grow your own food. So even with that, that's residential segregation. They're segregating you away from prosperity and making sure that you have a whole bunch of poverty. And they make sure they set up these invisible lines, and they do it for so many years that the people actually think that it's normal. Mm-hmm. But when we start doing community gardens, when we start doing mutual aid, when we start breaking the cycles of poverty, when we start learning the basics, when we start learning the skills, that we have the power to feed ourselves and determine what we want to do, that is sovereignty over our lives. It's just not food sovereignty. That's sovereignty over how we want to live. And so it's like Bobby Womack say, when the man across the railroad track, finally understand that he has the power to cross that railroad track, that's when the problem starts.